figured it would be appropriate to start this video with the American flag. All right, well, I think I've already lost interest in the Love is Blind analysis. I was bored while making the video, and then nobody really watched the video or commented. But that seems to be the norm for all my videos, unless that's very specific opinion about something that could be tied into, I guess, political. I don't know. You really have to trigger someone. You have to trigger someone to get some comments, and they're not pleasant comments anyway. But I'm not going to do really a analysis of the whole thing, but the sort of spring point, the starting point, whatever, of this video is going to be from that. But you know, it's in these latest episodes, they're starting to do these like political shit tests. It's mostly the women. Well, not mostly, entirely. I think it's like 2 or 3 of them. And they're sort of pushing their fiancés to sort of trying to see if they can find their secret evil opinions, you know. Do you vote the way I vote? And then the bullshit of like, voting is important. I don't think voting is important. I think voting the way they do is. I've talked about this many times before, but I hate that sort of bullshit thing where people pretend like they're so, it's not that they care about their political ideology, you know, in terms of whatever party that they favor, but it's that they're so democratic that they care so much that you voted. Did you vote? I don't care who you vote, as long as you vote. No, I don't know. I don't think I've ever met someone who actually really believes that shit. They care if you voted for who they think the right person is. But anyway, you know, maybe I'm living, as I've mentioned in other videos, maybe just me, that's sort of what's coming up on my feed or whatever, but I don't think so. In terms of what I'm about to talk about, which is just this sort of overly politicized society. This, you know, people make jokes. I make jokes in the past about, you know, piercings aren't a personality, or whatever, tattoos aren't whatever the fuck, you know, I made those jokes. But really, that stuff's not that important, or not particularly annoying to me. I don't care how people, in general, I mean, like all of us, I have my opinions on on sort of irrelevant physical things, but this thing that bothers me is, or the joke that I was alluding to making, which I'm struggling to get out, is you know, politics being an identity. And I'm just finding it more and more exhausting. Well, even though I've always felt this way to some degree and expressed it in different ways, I think it's just the thing that's like, and I truly mean this, that this is not me, it's depending on how it's being expressed, it truly is equally obnoxious to me, regardless if it's a, you know, left-wing or right-wing version of it. You just see these people on social media, and it's so annoying how, I don't know how into it they are, but it's just how predictable it all gets. It's like, this is my personality, I'm left-wing, and so I say these 5 cliche things over and over that you've heard from a million other left-wing people, and then the same thing with the right wing. The same thing with the right wing. It's like, oh, here's the things that I think, and here's the things that I like and I hate, and I'm a cooler, more moral person because I have these opinions. You know, both sides. And it's just like, to be cooler, more moral, whatever, insert positive thing that you think you're better than. I really think like your opinions on politics should be way down the list, right? Of what all these things that people sort of, what makes them feel like they're a good person, someone to be admired, the validation they want, whatever, and you'll get it, right? You can get it on either side as long as you're saying, whatever. You'll have your little like cult, your little cult of liberals, your little cult of conservatives that will suck you off if you repeat the same fucking unoriginal thoughts on what they love and what they hate. And it's just so clear too, like there's this thing where people just feel this need to sort of just to go down the line, and they have to be attached to the whole thing, the whole persona. They have to have that sort of identity of like these rigid views of right and wrong. And you know, that's why, you know, so much of, you know, there's a lot of people that used to sort of hate, I've talked about this a million times, but you know, kind of hate on religion, and you know, maybe rightfully so, and the sort of mindless, repetitive phrases, the moralizing, and you know, obviously that people have, myself included, have made that comparison to some of the leftist woke stuff, but it's the same thing on both sides, really. Now, I know we can't say, you know, percentage. I don't know if I can say percentage. You know, it's like we could have this sort of competition on who's worse about it, whatever. And it doesn't even, I don't know. I don't care. I'm not that interested in that. Because that's, you're getting, when you start doing that, well, who does it worse, though? Who does it worse? That's part of this whole game, right? It's not just even in terms of politics, but it's everything. It's the sort of the race stuff, the gender stuff, the who's better or worse in various ways between, you know, the sexes, the sexualities, the races, the this group, the that group. And I don't know, it's all sort of, I think it's like, I want to figure out how this is, of course I'm sure there's people that have already done this, but the sort of psychological thing that's happening here. But to me, it feels like a big part of what it is. It's a way to avoid actually looking at yourself in a real way, right? It's a way to avoid sort of the personal of like, what decisions am I making in my life? Am I happy? Am I a good person? You know, assuming you care about that in whatever way you define that. You know, it's just like, we can just constantly deflect away from that into one, there being sort of an enemy out there, a group or people to sort of hate. So, I don't know. I think, you know, obviously social media plays a big role in all this stuff, and sort of the 24/7. I mean, it started with, I guess, the way the news mainstream media changed, where, I don't know, however many years ago, where people talk about how that became sort of the 24/7 news cycle. But then also just, of course, that getting that on steroids, being social media, everyone posting their opinions constantly, everyone talking about their opinions, arguing, debating, every little thing at all times, having clips of different people to rile up the hate, right? Here's the thing we can find that the person on the right did. Here's the thing that the person on the left did. Let's replay this clip over and over. Let's be angry. And that's kind of what I've been thinking about too, is that maybe we like to be angry. Maybe that's at least a part of it. We like conflict. People seem to, they seek it, right? Any of the channels of popular YouTubers who are, political commentators, what are they doing all the time? It's just, they might as well say, here's how I can stoke your anger today, your feelings of superiority or disgust or whatever. Here's who's dangerous today. Here's who's moronic today. Here's who's coming for you. Here's what you have to be afraid of. And it's not to say that there can't be things that make sense to get angry about, especially as I've talked about when those things affect you in a personal way. Of course I can relate. If anyone has a story from the left or the right, they're like, here's this story of how this thing actually impacted my life. Not just in some sort of, I care about the world way, or I'm a good person because I have the right opinions, but no, like, here's how my life, actually has taken a turn for the worse because of X, Y, and Z. I'm much more interested in that from anyone of any political persuasion, when they're going to tie it into their personal story, even though, we've been taught to think of things as like, well, that's not real, that's anecdotal, bring out the stats. And while it does make sense that, if you're getting into these deep philosophical arguments on why we should look at the world in a certain way, it does make sense to bring in statistics into some of these things. But really, that's the problem to begin with anyway, is sort of this philosophical, ego contest, as opposed to actually the anecdotes. And the problem too would be, though, I'm not suggesting that we should use these anecdotes then to frame our whole way of seeing everything all the time, is that different people have different experiences, and there is a real pain and suffering that happens because of certain, we could call it right-wing or left-wing ways of framing things and then implementing ideas in the world that can be harmful, right? And what it boils down to is things are complicated, things are nuanced. Each situation actually has to be judged individually. And, that's not convenient for sort of the benefits of quick superiority that comes from having the right ideology, to just sit and talk about each individual situation and to acknowledge how in one situation something harms someone because of this reason, it harmed them differently in this situation. People like to have that sort of, not only the superiority, but the comfort of a consistent narrative, right? It's, I don't know, I always feel like I'm having to apologize for repeating myself, but I guess we all do, right? Especially any of these political shows, they all do, right? It's the same thing over and over again, right? Here's why trans is great, trans stuff's great, here's why trans stuff's terrible, here's why, billionaires are the best or the worst, or whatever the fuck the point is. So I guess I should stop apologizing for the redundancy, since it's pretty impossible to not be guilty of that. Everyone is. Anyway, I forgot what I was babbling about before I went into that tangent. But another thing, just I guess veering off course here again, is I was thinking about how, just connecting to some of this topics about social media. I think a lot of people understand the ways in which, okay, we used to have more community and now social media is sort of a poor substitute for that, or however it's framed about how we once had a more real meaningful relationships with people, and how that's gotten sort of hijacked or whatever. But I think what I was thinking about it is why the framing of these things is sometimes incorrect, is that I don't think there really is a going back, in the sense that for a lot of people, it's not that it's like, well, they're just missing that sort of wholesome community that could have been more accessible in the past or was more common. And so the reason why they're spending all their time on social media or addicted to it is because of the lack of community. It's actually that new, and maybe this is a meaningless distinction, but I feel like it isn't. There's new ways that technology creates these new addictions that don't have to do with, well, things in the past worked better, so we didn't need this, or this is a substitute. It's more that it can create new problems. And what I mean by this is that someone who has 1 million Instagram followers and gets that kind of attention, it's not only that they don't want to substitute it and trade it in for, like, quote unquote real, more authentic, meaningful connections, something more tangible than just the cycle of attention, which of course leads to probably other things like, resources through the money they get through ads or however they make their money by getting all that attention. But putting that aside, the money part aside for a minute, it's a new thing. It's a new addiction. It's like a new drug. And that's why I think I, along with other people, have misframed this so often of like this idea that, well, you can just go back to sort of, if we could go back to the more whole, not that it's not valuable to find a way to get more of the authentic connections and all that. I think that's something worth striving for, but it's almost like you can't undo what's already been seen. Most people aren't going to actually ever go on that quest to find this authentic thing. And not only is it probably, you look around and you kind of, as an adult, you don't know, well, where am I going to find this sort of community, right? Especially if you're not going to just go find it at a religious place. If that's not your cup of tea, then it's really like, well, man, it seems limited. How am I going to sort of cobble together a sort of community doesn't seem to be coming up naturally? How am I going to almost force this? But not only, like I said, is that difficult, but I don't know that we even really want that anymore. Because once you're addicted to this cycle, especially a kind of addiction that's not going to be, it's an addiction that seems to be, widespread and accepted, not shamed. Like, no one's shaming me for right now being on my phone, right? Gotta acknowledge the irony of that, right? But no one's gonna be like, hey man, enjoy your walk. Put down the phone, man. Hugs, not drugs. Hugs, not nature, not phones. The point is that this is a sort of addiction that we're willing to accept, and maybe it's not, even though we know there's negative consequences, it's not so visible as some other addictions where it's just right in your face. You can just kind of see the downward spiral, and it's a downward spiral that maybe is, it's like slow moving. It's one that we're all facing. But so anyway, the question that I had when I was thinking about this is like, especially tying it back to the original topic of the sort of reality dating, some of the themes that were coming up in this show, the Love is Blind show. It's like all these people have their Instagrams where, whether they know it or not, and I would actually lean towards they don't know it in a way that they really could. They might make a joke. They might make a joke about being addicted to it, but they don't know that they really are in a more serious way. It's that, do they want a real romantic relationship that has all these sort of rules and restrictions about, flirting with others, interacting with others, I don't know, all the things that go along with social media? Is that what they really want? And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, can we have both? Can people have a real relationship and still have the relationship with Instagram? I mean, they can, but I'd argue it's kind of like they're polyamorous. They have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and then they also have their relationship with their social media app. And there just seems to be so much, like, what I've noticed with this show and just people in general, something that has always frustrated me, but maybe more so as I get older and grumpier, is the sort of communication games that take place that also might connect to a lack of self-awareness. So how I'm tying this into all this talk about social media is sort of the lack of acknowledgement of what it is, right? It's like when you're posting a picture, whether you're a man or a woman, where there's nothing really interesting happening other than clearly you're signaling that you are cool and sexually attractive, or maybe, some combination of cool and sexually attractive. But even if you don't have the full awareness of what the point is, now maybe, like I said, maybe you can write this off as sort of trying to gain attention, a following, which leads to resources. Don't worry, baby, I'm going to use those resources on you, right? Okay, we can argue about whether or not that's a good cop-out for the attention seeking in terms of still being in a meaningful relationship. Oh no, don't worry, I'm just taking advantage. I'm taking advantage of other people's sort of addictions and loneliness and whatnot to gather resources for us. We're going to have something healthy, but we're going to take advantage of other people's unhealthiness or loneliness or, their fantasies because their lives are unfulfilling. But we're going to have a fulfilling life. There's so many different rabbit holes I could go down with that. But so putting aside, we'll say, okay, maybe that's a sort of thesis we'd be willing to listen to. But putting that aside, if someone's not even saying that or going in that direction, what is happening is that you are a man, you are a woman who wants to have sexual options. You want to have, whether it's for something long-term, something casual, whether you're a man and the truth is biologically, it makes sense for you to not be, you're not naturally monogamous. So the truth is you have this sort of, sexual drive to attract as many women as possible, whatever. And maybe if we're looking at it from the angle of the woman who, she still wants to, maybe she doesn't care as much as the man does about all the sexual options, but she does always want to have a provider and a backup provider. So here's her way of doing that. I think people are dishonest on one hand, but simultaneously lacking in full self-awareness. And they get caught up in sort of ways to, cliches about it all. Like, there's a reason why both sides get jealous, right? They're looking at the Instagram, they're checking their history, their messages, all this stuff. But they won't just sort of acknowledge most of the time, because they both still want to be part of this addiction cycle. They don't want to both acknowledge, why are we on social media? Is it because this is our best way to, and maybe it is, to bring in the resources to further our goal of the sort of traditional monogamous husband and wife and kids relationship? Or is there something else at play? Is it sort of, like I said, keeping the options open, making sure you have backup options, wanting the things that you want to get supposedly from a relationship, some sort of attention, support, connection, whatever, that you're seeking that through this sort of social media thing, right? That's right. I'm saying you're polygamous because your other boyfriend, your other girlfriend is each of these apps. It's sort of a fake boyfriend. And I've seen this in a more concrete ways too. I've talked to women who are in relationships, just random women, however it comes about. And they have all these different justifications on why it doesn't matter, their boyfriend wouldn't mind, whatever. Just recently, I was talking to someone randomly on one of these social media apps. And yeah, it was just hours and hours of, admittedly, I was doing more of the flirting, but still, if you're someone and you're in a relationship and you know someone is flirting with you and the intention is clear and you keep engaging with it, what are you doing? But this is the way people communicate, is in one way, like I said, it's pure dishonesty, where they're aware they're being dishonest and they do it anyway, or they've bought into some sort of story that allows them to be dishonest. Oh, I like meeting new people. I like communicating with, I don't know. There's some reason, but the bottom line is that we don't have to overcomplicate some of these things, and we don't have to shame everyone for it anyway. Maybe it's true that maybe the answer really is, I'm not saying it is, but maybe I'm willing to definitely go down that path. Maybe no one really wants to be in a relationship. Maybe everyone really, they're in relationships out of fear. They're afraid of the dangers of the world, of loneliness. They're afraid of unsafe sex. They're afraid. They have a variety of fears, some of which maybe it'd be admirable to not fear, some of them which are legitimate fears that just are perfectly logical to hold on to. But whatever it is, that the relationship thing might come from a place of fear, as opposed to what a lot of us, the way we're sort of glamorizing relationships more, a place of love and something beautiful. And this is not to say that I don't think relationships can't be beautiful. Certainly I know they can be in moments anyway. I've experienced moments, I've seen people in moments where certainly there is something beautiful happening. But the long-term commitment thing, which once again, I'm not saying can't be beautiful. If anything, I still do, hold on to that as the ideal. But is it really coming from a place of love and beauty and, insert whatever goodness? Or does it always originate from a place of fear? And of course, I could say it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. There's reasons why fear pushes us in that direction. And there's also reasons why it's just sort of beautiful for its own sake, aside from just some sort of reaction to, primal needs being met or obvious dangers being avoided. Anyway, why was I going on this? I guess it was about, maybe we don't need to shame people. It's not that, maybe we do need to shame people, but the bigger problem is actually the original thing happening, which is sort of this sort of relationship love game that for the most part, we've all kind of agreed on. Even the people that think that they're like being edgy with, they've thought beyond it with polygamy or whatever spin on it, they still more or less buy into the narrative, because they're still aiming, even the polygamy thing, right? Theoretically, even though I have made my doubts, my skepticism known, theoretically, they're still buying into the commitment narrative. It's just commitment with a twist. But so maybe that's the problem to begin with, and that maybe it does warrant more skepticism. I'm not sure. But still, either way, there's something distasteful about people that lack self-awareness, that are dishonest with themselves and others, regardless if it's not really them at fault, right? It's really the game we've all bought into. Well, unfortunately, whether or not that's true, you bought into the game, you're going to say you're going to play the game. Well, either figure out a different game to play, or if you're going to play the game, well, now you're responsible for following the rules. And when you break the rules, it seems a little distasteful. Now, Am I saying this person's breaking the rules? This person in particular that I'm referencing, I don't know what the rules are in their relationship. I know that there's not a whole lot of logic behind engaging with someone for hours and hours who makes it very clear that they're coming from a romantic, or even if we might say sexual place, as opposed to just there being some other reason for engaging. It just clearly there's a reason for this stranger and I to be friends, or we really need each other for some sort of platonic entertainment or whatever. But I think people do struggle being honest with others and themselves, including in this show. We'll tie it back to Love is Blind. There's all these games that happen because I guess they lose leverage. One, they're afraid that they'll be judged. Of course, if you're on camera too on national TV, but there's a fear of being judged, a real fear, because it will happen. You will get roasted for whatever you do on social media. But aside from that, it's the power thing of like, well, if I told this person what's really going on, like, I forgot the names of these people, but like in one situation where whatever his real reason is for doubting the relationship or having problems with her dating someone or hooking up with someone prior to the show, it's like there's this fear of the consequences of honesty or the lack of awareness. But let's put aside the lack of awareness. The fear of honesty is, what would he say to her? Hey, I'm a really horny dude. It scares the shit out of me to only fuck you forever. I mean, even while I've been on this show, there's been multiple women that I've seen that I've wanted to fuck, and I know that I've been told that that's not right, that's not, if I really loved you, I wouldn't really have these urges. I wouldn't be so afraid of only fucking you if I really cared about you. So that's, messing with me. Or in addition to that, you fuck some other guy right before the show, not only does that make me kind of feel kind of jealous, but maybe that also taps into the reality of like, well, why would you? You're committing to me forever when, you're never gonna fuck anyone else again, but just a month ago, you even knew you were gonna be on this show and you were fucking someone. What does fucking even mean at this point? My ego, it's feeling, it seems like an assault on my sort of newfound ownership of you and your ownership of me, right? Both ways. You don't have to make it a sort of a gender thing, right? It's both in a commitment. You both own each other. You both possess each other. But man, you already kind of seems like you just were fucking someone else a month ago. So not only am I kind of curious about fucking this other girl I was talking to at the same time I was talking to you, but also you clearly seem to have interest in fucking whoever. Why are we gonna stop doing that? Are we really? I think and this is me just theorizing about a couple of things I can't mind read, but there's all these complications in sort of this game they're about to play. The game of, well, before, for years or however long, we like to flirt with people, we like to fuck people, but now we're gonna sort of pretend, not with awareness, but some part of me knows it's pretend. Some part of me knows it's pretend that we're the special ones, and suddenly, like, you're not gonna want to fuck other guys. I'm not gonna want to fuck other women. There's something so special here. It's so, I don't know. I guess I'm just alluding to the fact that I think it is all a bit of a game. Not all games are bad. Game doesn't have to be bad. Games can be beautiful and important. We don't, some people can say, well, life itself is a game, right? So just calling something a game doesn't make it bad, but it does mean that it might be apart from sort of truth or real in some way, right? Like with sports. I think sports can be actually important or beautiful or fun or lots of good things. Sports can be lots of good things. But at the end of the day, you know, a lot of times we can see how these sort of, I don't know what the right word is, these forced rivalries don't really mean much, right? You have a husband and wife, one's a Gator fan and one's a Seminole fan or whatever, and it's like, all right, so now some people do take it probably too seriously, right? And they get into fights, and they might even get into fights and end up killing someone because they're rooting for a different team, right? But at least when it comes to sports, we can see how at the end of the day, the game becomes a little bit silly the more if you take it seriously to a certain extreme. And so I think that's where it comes into some of these other games too, though, right? The political game, people who take it a bit too serious. Not that there aren't serious aspects, just like with sports, there can be a serious aspect within the game. In politics, there are serious things that, you know, can and should be taken seriously with actual thoughtful, nuanced, long conversations, not just sound bites, not just one-liners of hate, right? But the same thing within this game of love, that it is sort of a game. It doesn't really appear to be, not that natural is always good, but it is something I think worth thinking about and referencing to some degree, regardless of, you know, not wanting to fall into that fallacy. If you believe that we are animals and you look at other animals, even though yes, there are some monogamous animals out there, I don't know how many or what percent, but even those animals, they certainly don't play the full-on love game that we play, right? With the music and the stories and the cliches and the rules and regulations and what's real love and what's the difference between being in love and falling in love, right? All these words that humans use to confuse, to control, to manipulate, and not always that way. A lot of times it's not, like I said, it's not a conscious attempt to do all those things all the time. Sometimes it is, but they're actually confused themselves by words, by their own words, by other words, by stories, by cliches and narratives that they're trying to match up that contradict each other in the end, right? Humans tend to be hypocritical, and they have philosophies that contradict so much. And so I guess what I'm suggesting at the end of the day, maybe there is a reason why we have to sort of protect ourselves from truth, right? We need to stick to sort of tact and other forms of non-direct, straightforward communication because of all the ways that our egos seem to be fragile and, you know, whatever, a million other reasons. But for the most part, I think I advocate for more truth, and that perhaps the deepest kind of beauty and connection and goodness can come from more honesty, more directness, less cliche one-liners, but maybe just more simple fundamental truths. Like, what's going on here? You know, but I think it's easier said than done, because we already have all these issues. We already have all these issues that lead to our sort of fragile egos, our fear. You know, as I was saying, maybe it's actually fear that leads us to wanting these committed relationships to begin with. That fear can't just be readily tossed aside and dismissed. Oh, come on, you know, that's silly. Get rid of that fear. Maybe if you stopped being afraid of these 10 things, you wouldn't need this sort of irrational proclamation of commitment or whatever. But I acknowledge those fears are very real and serious, and they're not all just sort of fears of fantasy. You know, life can be dangerous and hard and lonely, and if you don't have someone on your side, and the dating marketplace can be difficult and trying, both in sort of real physical dangers, but also emotional ones. You know, the cycle of rejecting people and getting rejected can wear on you, and on and on. That's why even in the show you hear, you know, even I think on the altar, it's like, what's one of her top reasons for being relieved, for being about to enter this commitment? It's like, man, dating is so terrible, right? That's like, she even says that, one of them, you know, and probably more people think that would realize it's kind of a little bit cheesy to maybe say that on the altar, or on the, whatever you call it. But yeah, we want to stop various pains. We want to protect ourselves, and that's one avenue that we think is a solution. And clearly for some people it is, or at least a temporary one.